Good afternoon. It's Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon. It's 5 after 12, and this video will be posted, I presume, probably about an hour or so, because I don't expect to make this a brief one. And yesterday's video, if you haven't seen that already, I promised it would be brief, and it was more brief than it usually was. And this one will be even briefer than that. So I have nothing. I have no pontification to make except that today is Sunday and 1 o'clock the Yankees are playing, and I hope to be able to be watching the Yankees at 1 o'clock. He smiled. It's, as I said earlier, this is Holy Week for those of you who observe the Easter holiday, and so I wish you a happy Easter. And there's also, I believe, Wednesday is Passover. So if anyone is celebrating that, certainly I will extend my my greetings and blessings to you on that as well. And so I'm trying to keep things a little less intense for the next this week, and actually for the week after this as well. And as we move to the next place, the only thing I'm going to say that to add to what I said to you yesterday, two things. One is that the discussion question is up for this coming week. It's the same discussion question that's been up for about 3 weeks now, except now we move from strategies to criteria. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I've already discussed it. Essentially, you need to identify how you mean to evaluate, assess, judge, decide whether your strategies that you've begun to come up with are assessed validly and reliably. And you know how to do this if you know how to write a good lesson plan. It's the same premise. Now it's extended to planning as such. Enough said. And in case anyone is wondering, I think I said it yesterday as well. Pretty sure I did that. In the end, I'm looking for about 5 strategies. In truth, I'd be looking for a lot more, but 5 strategies is more than enough for you to wet your whistle and get your muscles started to get this very essential skill set. It's not just one skill, it's a skill set wrapped around the premise of change, which brings me to what we're going to talk today. So again, yesterday's video was a catch up on the assignments issues and the discussions issues and the journal issues. I have actually, as of this moment, evaluated every single journal entry from the beginning of the year up through this morning. And there isn't a journal assignment that I think due today. I think it is. I'm not sure. That's I think only 2 of you had answered me up to this point, but I'll get to those before we do that. Grandpa Professor Bernardo is going away on Wednesday. Actually, I think it's Thursday, taking their 2 granddaughters and 2 grandsons and their families to the happiest place on earth. And looking forward to that. And so we're going to keep things kind of light for my own head as well as for yours. Enough said. All right. So the only thing I want to do is I really want to complete something I started 2 weeks ago, and let's slide for about 10,000 reasons. Most paramount one being I must have had about 10,000 dissertations to committees to sit on, and I just couldn't do justice to you while doing justice to that. Enough said. So I'm going to pull up this week's agenda, and as I said yesterday, you really need to read the agenda every week, even though they may look alike. They're not always identical. As in this case, there's some of the things that are repetitive and others are not. And you really need to watch the videos that I put up. Now, in this case, for example, you can see that we have the first link up. This was yesterday's link to the conversations, what I call housekeeping and assignments. That's up. As soon as I finish this assignment, this presentation, I will post another video of this. So you have to watch 2 videos at least in this case, 3 in a certain sense. You need to watch the videos. I mean, I don't know what else to say anymore. You need to watch the videos. You need to watch the videos, and go whatever other links I've put up. Okay, so we're talking about change, and change was in my mind, the only reason why you come to work in the morning and what you need to consider yourself to be in terms of leaders. I'm going to have more to say about this the week after Easter, but you are the future. That's a platitude, I know, but you are the future as project leaders. I applaud St. John's for coming up with this grant project leader approach from about 10 years ago, when they recognized that the great need for folks like you who have the capacity to be leaders and have the skill sets to lead those leading skills into creating and sustaining. That's an important word there, a sustain word. Change in order to meet the needs of ENL TESOL students as such. I know I use the words interchangeably. I may be mistaken. Just please understand what I'm driving at. That's what I call futuring. And I'll come to that next week, begin to come to that next week. But in the end, it is about change. There's no reason why you'd be taking this program, in my view, if you didn't want to help make change happen. And you may also be here because you want to be leaders. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. That's what I did. And that's what all leaders have done. They wanted to be leaders. No one, put a gun between their eyes and said, you will be a leader, whether you want to be or not. You've chosen to try to become leaders, and I applaud you for that. But I will press you a little harder and say you have chosen to become leaders in order to create change and sustain it. That's the hard part, by the way, the sustain part. And we're going to get into that from all sorts of corners along the way, if we have gotten into that as of about 2 weeks ago. And what I'm going to do is go back to the two models I posted. One is, I'm going to flip them around actually. One is a little more broad, and the other one is much more specific. And I noticed that I always forget the people who say the things that they say in the discussion questions or the assignment or the general assignments. So I apologize to the person who said what I'm about to quote, which is, say, I'm watching the videos and I see that some of those things that the McCrell video we're talking about have actually begun to happen in my school since we began to feed in some new administrators over there. Now, project yourself out 2 years from now, potentially, and future yourself out and say, okay, well, now I have the stripe. We always had the stripe, but now I have the stripe to lead change, to make things better for the teachers and the students who you choose to serve, and obviously the demographic of the future's trend of growing set of immigrants coming to this country and to the city and to all schools in New York State is almost overwhelming. Off track for a little bit. I'm reading a book called Elizabeth Street, and it's about Italian immigration in the early 1900s. And make no mistake about it, some of the issues of education and of social integration into the fabric of American society weren't a whole heck of a lot different then as they are now. All right. I'm not smiling smugly. I'm just reminding people that your forebears, and some of you may be immigrants yourself, come to think of it, you recognize the issues that are associated with assuring that children of immigrants, for the most part, are getting an education that enables them to become part of a vibrant, nurtured American society. Walls and notwithstanding that we sometimes hear about in the politics of 21st century. Enough said. I can go off on a tangent on that in a New York minute. Two premises. They won't take long. I'll probably drop back a little bit just to get us going. First one is Simon Sinek, and I think I said it about 2 weeks ago. I had not heard of Sinek until about 3 years ago. I probably should have heard of him earlier, but for some reason I got past my radar, and I've rapidly become a great admirer of his. And he's a change agent. He talks about change. And what he does is he's talking about organizations. He's not necessarily talking about schools. Make no mistake about it, however, that school's an organization. It's a peculiar, and I use that word on purpose, kind of organization. Uh, Very peculiar in certain senses, and not always good certain senses, but it is an organization, and to make change happen in any organization requires some very deft handling. I'm not sure if I used this metaphor a couple of weeks ago. I think that I did. I am music illiterate. I mean, I can listen to music and like most music that I hear. I can't make any music. I can't sing a song. I can barely put on, download a song I want to hear, let alone make some. I have a couple of grandsons who do electronic composing. And I can only respect because I haven't got any idea how they do it. I've been to my share of operas and my share of concerts, notwithstanding the Beach Boys kind of concerts, if you ever heard of them. I'm talking about orchestra concerts, more or less, over the years. And I can't say I appreciated them very much because I had literally no knowledge about them. I just went there because somebody told me I was supposed to be there, or there's a couple other reasons as well. But the bottom line is, when you see how an orchestra leader or an opera composer and a conductor weave and sustain and synthesize all the pieces of the instruments and the singing and the scenery and all of that, it's really quite boggling to think about, and yet they do. So I used to liken change to a music conductor in a symphony. I think it's got a lot of validity, but I don't think it's really captures what if I understand music correctly. And I already again say I don't necessarily have my arms around that whole premise. If I understand music correctly, yeah, the conductor can point to the drums and point to the violins and the chimes and so forth to make everything integrate. And usually it comes out as a wonderful combination of sound. However, I more nearly think that good music could be construed as a jazz ensemble. Now, what does Bernardo know about a jazz ensemble? About that much. What I do know about this much is that in that milieu, I can't think of a better word right now. I don't think I've ever used that word before. In that milieu, the band members are playing off each other. They're co-constructing the music as they go along. That's pretty cool if you think about it. Let me go to hockey for a minute. I'm trying to become a hockey person. And little by little, I'm becoming much more appreciative of it than I was in the beginning. And one thing, one quote I remember from, I think it was Wayne Gretzky, not sure. It was All-Star, Hall of Fame, immortal, not that long ago, who said that he skates to where he expects the puck to be. He's not waiting for for the wing, the left wing, whatever they call these guys, to get the puck into the corner. He knows it's going there. He feels it. He integrates with the W of a whole. He integrates with the whole team, and they think with each other. That's what change is really about. And as I've said to you before, change is transformation. You are going to try to transform people. Avernell and I had a great conversation about this the other day in terms of shared vision, if you remember Avernell. Assure yourself that everyone's got the same vision. And there's ways to talk about that across the next several weeks. To commit to hearing each other and feeling each other come down the ice to score the goal. I kind of like the way I said that, kind of stopped myself and savored what I just said. Because it makes so much sense. And I'll be repeating myself along those lines along the way. So change is a science. McRell gives you the pieces of the science. Cynic, more or less, does the same thing. But on top of that, It's an art. And art can only be practiced by experience. And reading a biography of Leonardo da Vinci, and I thought when he painted something, he just stood up there and painted it. Turns out it took him years to paint some of the things he did. He sketched and he unsketched and he erased and he painted over to get the masterpieces that he's got. Which makes you think about sculpture, which is a different story, because you can't paint over this. You can't unchip what you've chipped away in a piece of sculpture. But I digress. So I want you to use your own mindset. You need to begin to recognize how you view your role, ROLE, how you view your role. Are you an orchestra leader? Are you a part of a jazz ensemble? Are you a hockey player? There are differences. The research seems to suggest, and I don't want to overstate this, but the research seems to suggest there is a science to this. However, it's the art that wins the game. And that's about co-empowerment. And only we'll talk more about that in more ways than you can imagine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Cynic for a minute.
This thing called planning has been around for a long, long time. People would plan out the activities they're going to engage in. More recently, has been a discipline called strategy. People have put those two things together to call something strategic planning. Unfortunately, those things are not the same, strategy and planning. So just putting them together and calling it strategic planning doesn't help. What most strategic planning is in the world of business has nothing to do with strategy. It's got the word, but it's not. It's a set of activities that the company says it's going to do. We're going to.
Okay, don't get put off by the word business. I virtually every one of you agree that schools are not businesses, and I totally agree with you too. However, a school is an organization, and that's really what he's driving at here.
Improve customer experience. We're going to open this new plant. We're going to start a new talent development program. A whole list of them, and they all sound good. But the results of all of those are not going to make the company happy because they didn't have a strategy. What's a strategy? A strategy is an integrated set of choices that positions you on a playing field of your choice in a way that you win. So there's a theory. Strategy has a theory. Here's why we should be on this playing field, not this other one. And here's how on that playing field, we're going to be better than anybody else at serving the customers on that playing field. That theory has to be coherent. It has to be doable. You have to be able to translate that into actions for it to be a great strategy. Planning does not have to have any such coherence. And it typically is what people in manufacturing want. The few things they want to build a new plant, and the marketing people want to launch a new brand, and the talent people want to hire more people. There tends to be a list that has no internal coherence to it and no specification of a way that is going to accomplish collectively some goal for the company. The planning is quite comforting. Plans typically have to do with the resources you're going to spend. So we're going to build a plant. We're going to hire some people. We're going to launch a new product. Those are all things that are on the cost side of businesses. Who controls your costs? Who's the customer of your costs? The answer is you are. You decide how many square feet to lease, how many raw materials to buy, how many people to hire. Those are more comfortable because you control them. A strategy, on the other hand, specifies an outcome, a competitive outcome that you wish to achieve, which involves customers wanting your product or service enough that they will buy enough of it to make the profitability that you'd like to make. The tricky thing about that is that You don't control them. You might wish you could, but you can't. They decide, not you. That's a harder trick. So that means putting yourself out and saying, here's what we believe will happen. We can't prove it in advance. We can't guarantee it, but this is what we want to have happen and that we believe will happen. It's much easier to say, I'll build a factory. I will hire more people.
Okay, this is not cynic. I'm not sure how this particular video came up, but we can work with it for the moment. I don't agree with some of the things he just said. He is right about the strategy versus planning premise. A strategy is a long time futuring. There's that word again. I'll let you figure out what it means, but I think you can take it from context as such. So keep that in the back of your mind, because what he's talking about is a word I'm going to use is a little different. The word I used with Avenel the other day was shared vision. And that's nothing wrong with that. Certainly the one that most people would be familiar with. I'm going to give you another term, and that's called the preferred future. When it comes to the future, there are three kinds of futures, actually. There's what's possible. It is possible that pigs could fly. I could even show you an argument that it's going to happen within your lifetime. It's possible pigs could fly. That's the first P. The second P, the middle P, which is really the most important one, believe it or not, is what's probable. What are the probable futures out there? The probable future is that sometime during this next week, you're going to watch this video. That's a probable future. Easy enough to figure out. A probable future is that there's going to be some, hopefully, a peaceful hubbub about the indictment and arraignment of the former president of the United States this week. You can expect a measure of hubbub. That's a probable future. It's what you want to have happen from it is another story. It's a probable future that you will be running and sustaining a ESOL program of some sort. It's also for you, I would imagine, a preferred one. So begin to think that way. And what's your probable futures for the rest of today? What's your preferred future? What he's not talking about, I don't think, is he's not talking about the way to influence people, to co-plan. He's making it sound unilateral. That is to say, the leader says, well, okay, everybody hop on one foot. The leader says, okay, everybody hop on the other foot, and so forth. I don't see it that way. And you shouldn't see it that way. Yeah, I'm talking to you. When you said when we considered that there might be a shared vision issue in the building in which you work, insofar as TESOL children are concerned, you stand up and say, okay, I'm telling everybody you're going to have a shared vision now. I'm going to make a vision for you. I'm going to share it with you. Well, that's not shared vision. Shared vision is co-developed.
People, etc., then I will have customers end up liking our offering more than those of competitors. The tricky thing about planning is that while you're planning, chances are at least one competitor is figuring out how to win. When US air carriers were busily planning, what routes to fly and there was this little company in Texas called Southwest that had a strategy for winning. And, at first that looked largely irrelevant because it was tiny. What Southwest Airlines was aiming for was an outcome. What they wanted to be is a substitute for Greyhound.
This is boring me. It's okay. He made his point. We're going to move on back over to Cynic.
You said that this journey with why?
Yes.
Start with a deeply personal, painful moment.
Yes.
What was that?
So I lost my passion for my own work.
I don't like this one either. I'll find it in a second. Give me a minute. This is more like it.
But here's the biggest mistake companies make when they're doing cultural transformations.
they treat it like it's a marketing campaign. Where here's the launch date, right? And here are all the programs we're going to make everybody go through. And here are all the PowerPoints, and here are all the executives that are going to give the PowerPoints. You're nodding yes, I'm getting something right. Right? And then it doesn't work. Or people are resistant, or fight, or don't show up, or even sabotage. And it's all well intended. It's imperfect. And sometimes we get the cultural thing wrong or the timing wrong, but it's all well intended and it falls flat, and it's a big waste of time and a big waste of money, and we're right back where we started. Right? There's something called the law of diffusion of innovations. This must become your best friend. Okay?
Yeah, I know you watched most of this video already, but so I'm just what I'm going to say is not necessarily, prophetic as such. He's really going to talk about what we call early adopters, late adopters. And he does a nice job at this actually by pointing out that there are people who will sign off at most anything. They're what we call early adopters. And there are some people who, at the other end of the curve, I should say, who will have to be dragged kicking and screaming into a change. And then there's the people in the middle who if you remember correctly, said, well, you really don't have to go after them. They'll come along sooner or later. And what you should do is concentrate on the people who are, well, let's get to that part.
You will always get about 10%. That's what you'll say. They just get it. We love them. They get it. And 10% of the company is going to be all in. It's not enough. And so this that Geoffrey Moore called the chasm, crossing the chasm, is the magical gap. And the way you get it is you don't talk to these people at all. You ignore them. And you aim at these people only, the early adopters, because these people do not want to try something new until someone else has tried it first. And let me tell you how it looks, because I've done it. So a large company, many, many more people than is in your company, 200,000 people, wanted me to help them do a millennial training program. So I said, great.
All right, you saw this.
And they have to apply, because I want people to put in extra time and extra energy. And the problem with the internet is we've made everything easy. Let's try and make everything as so easy as possible. Click, 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 you're in. No, I want to make things a little bit difficult, right? So they had to fill out a proper essay and submit it. And we actually read all of them, and we could tell who was phoning it in, and we could tell who actually genuinely wanted to be there. And we selected 100 people. And we only did it from the East Coast offices, just because it was convenience. We did New York, it was on the East Coast, so New York and Virginia, right? Just because it was easier. Maybe a few of the other offices, actually. There was also Chicago and all that. Whatever, a bunch of the offices. I gave this wonderful workshop. And at the end of it, I said, hey guys, we don't have a millennial training program. We want to do one. So I'm asking for volunteers from this room to help build it. You're not going to get any extra money. You might have to work extra hours on your own time. And you may or may not have this included in your compensation or promotion packages at all. Who wants in? I had 50 volunteers who said that they were going to help build this program for no additional money and no particular personal benefit. It's because they believed in it, right? 2 weeks later, one of the senior executives in the company calls me up, furious at me. He's so angry at me. Do you know why? Because leaders from across the entire country were calling up, screaming at him, why don't we get a millennial training program? Why is it only on the East Coast? And I said, congratulations, that's called demand. Because they all went back to work and said, this is amazing, right? Had I done it the traditional way, those same leaders would have called up and yelled, why do I have to give up my people for an hour and a half every week? I am busy. We don't need this. Would have been the exact same response. So You want to make it slightly difficult, an invitation, voluntary.
All right, this is a great point he's talking about. I'm going to use a different term. It's the same premise, but a different term. I'm going to mention an author. Hopefully you have a chance to, maybe you have read some of his books. The author is Malcolm Gladwell. I think I mentioned him a couple of times in earlier videos. Not an educator, more nearly a sociologist, a columnist actually, and an author. But essentially he speaks to social phenomena and how they operate and how things happen from any number of corners, and some really interesting books. I mean, some of them, one called The Outliers, just is mind blowing in so many respects, especially if you're an educator. That's a book you want to read. You realize that the statistics show that a child's birthday will often dictate how well that child will do in her entire school career. If they were born too late in the year, they're almost always behind the ones before. You can understand how that comes out, but the data are clear on that. But that's not what I'm talking about. He talks about it in another book called The Tipping Point. And it is exactly what it sounds like, although it's not about education specifically. And then again, it is. And that's about how change happens, what I call, he didn't use this word, I am, what I call organically. It kind of bubbles up from underneath rather than something somebody pours down the funnel, so to speak. And what that's about is really what it's saying is, I'm going to show you some videos about this in a couple of weeks. What that's saying is it's talking about somebody gets into, a new pair of sneakers or the latest social media, something starts to go viral versus why something else does not go viral, even though it may be the same topic. And one person tells another, and the next person tells another, and suddenly it gets big enough so that it becomes what we call a critical mass, a tipping point. I'm going to show you this in a couple of different ways in the next couple of weeks. A tipping point. Well, suddenly everybody wants to be in this premise. Most people, anyway, will jump onto whatever the fad or innovation du jour may or may not be. Now, can a leader manufacture that? Organically, a leader can do it if you can do it along the lines of what Sinek is showing you here. When you go after the right kind of people, you can think right now, if I stopped this tape right now and said, if you were running your program, who are the folks in your building who wouldn't want extra money, wouldn't want the union things to go on, who would want to help you create something new for the good of the students? Now, I'm going to bet my house that you're going to be able to think of a couple. I'm not saying you're going to get a unanimous, but I am saying you're going to get a couple. And those are the people whom you curry, nurture, and encourage to co-empower each other. And that's where your change begins. So your strategies have to be long-term strategies, not thumb in the dike, quick fixes, because that only stops the dike from leaking for a little bit before it bursts open and floods everybody out. Enough said about this. Now, again, Sinek is talking about some good tactics to use to get people to want to engage a change. And this is all well and good. And I admire him. And there's many, many videos that he puts out and books. And I encourage you to try to grab one down the line, if not, yes, tomorrow, to pull that together. But for now, let's go back to the the other video that we started the other day and we didn't quite finish. And this one I'm just going to flat out.
Here's the poop. Seriously, if someone's colon is clogged and they have constipation and it's been 2, 3, or even 10 days without relief, where does it all go? The answer is a process called fecal reabsorption. First, the liquid components are reabsorbed through the intestinal walls and shuttled into the bloodstream. The longer some
refer to this as managing change because it is something that must be managed at times. It's not just about getting people to do things. It's about managing all of the essential elements of change, that being programmatic, financial, human capital, external facing, that's your community. There are always implications when you make major changes. So within these 7 leadership responsibilities, you'll notice the very first one is called change agents. These come from
I don't think any of these are particularly new to you. I think, and assuming you watched this video already, it's certainly not nearly as entertaining as Simon Sinek or the poop commercial that we inadvertently put up there. It's the first time you've heard that word in a college course, especially at downtown St. John's. But let's just go back. Let's take a look at this for a moment when he talks about what are the responsibilities to managing change. Now, I don't like the word managing at all. Managing to me means I'm making sure that the trains are running on time and the school buses, colors are lined up in the right direction. Does it need to be done? Without a doubt, right? That's managing. Leading is leading. Leading is inspiring and encouraging people to work with you to co-create and then to sustain. So I don't like that word managing, not one bit. I think I may have mentioned to you when I hire people, when I did interviews from leadership positions, I would say, and I used to say on a scale of 1 to 10, with the 1 meaning, yes, I'm a great manager. I run the clipboard, I look around, I check off my little checklist, and I keep all the trains running on time. 10 meaning, yeah, I'm Moses. I'm up on the mountaintop and I'm coming down with the 10 Commandments tablets, and I'm here to tell you these are the things you want to do with me. I mean, that sounds very interesting. One sounds so much more intriguing than the other. The Moses person is a person you want to be. Person who wants to make sure that the train runs on time. I mean, most clerks can do that, with all respect to people who are clerks. That ain't managing. That ain't leading. That's managing. So I used to say that to a candidate. I say, from a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you land? And they kind of knew what the answer was that I wanted. So most of them would give themselves a score of 6 or 7, and I could live with that. But as I began to push that button a little harder to see what they really meant, I realized that was a ridiculous scale to offer, because more leaders nowadays have to be good managers or have somebody manage for them. Bernardo was, I like to think, pretty inspiring. I got people to run into fires when they didn't want to, but I was not real good at deciding how the school buses lined up. That wasn't my thing, and I had no patience for it, but luckily I found somebody who might work for me who did. So she did all that, and I ran around with the Moses tablets things, because I viewed myself as a change agent, as you should, and you are, or will be, because of the nature of programs through which you're coming. I view myself as pretty flexible, sometimes too flexible. Sometimes flexibility, I can't say it talk this morning. Flexibility is viewed as a weakness, but I always thought of flexibility as a strength. To go with the flow and to adjust for things as you see it going. I have and had, and you've been exposed to more than you probably want to be exposed to, ideals and beliefs. And I love to turn people on. Still do. I love to charge people up. Yeah, analogy I use is a grain of sand in an oyster shell. Now, if you know anything about grains of sand, you know that they're irritants. They get into your shoes as you're walking on the beach, that's an irritant. We know that. A grain of sand that's inserted into the lining of an oyster shell causes an irritant to take place. And the irritant originally, first of all, becomes an ulcer. But as the ulcer begins to get worse, quite frankly, the ulcer becomes a pearl. And so the good leaders turn people on. Another word I love to use, my favorite word in the whole English language, I mean, not the whole language, but certainly one of my top 10, is catalyze. mix people together and see what the chemistry will be, and hope that they blow the place up. And then you bring it back together again and rearrange the parts. That's inspiring to redo a TESOL program that might be not meeting the kids' needs, or more likely not engaging the whole faculty, for example, and working with each other to make sure that everybody gets across the academic finish line. You know, good leaders nowadays, and I really get the idea that some of you are very good at this, is that is your, you know, your knowledge of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Goes without saying, if you don't know from curriculum how it spirals and works with each other, then you shouldn't be in that job in the first place. And like akin to what I talked about yesterday's video and a little bit this morning, is about you need to know how to monitor how things are going and to evaluate it. That's that criteria word again. And then in the end, to continue it, to optimize it, to keep turning your dials with your co-leaders, not just all by yourself, with your co-leaders to make it all come together. I'm going to continue with this. I think with that, what I really wanted you to do, I didn't want to give you another discussion question to work from or a journal assignment for this week. But if I were, I would say, how do you see yourself in those 6 things? I can see myself pretty good in most of them, but not so good in maybe monitoring and evaluating. Sometimes I drop the ball on that. Sometimes I'm optimizing too, I suspect. Evaluate your leaders, evaluate your bosses now. When any kind of change comes down the line, I presume from top down, when any kind of change comes down, may not be coming from your building, may be coming from district office or from DOE, for most of you, or from the head of the diocese. What does that suggest for how well the change can happen and stay happening? And with that, we'll call it a day. And I urge you to watch this video over the next couple of days. The only value it's got for you, anything you're doing right now, is perhaps to help you get that action plan, squeeze that down a little bit more. But in the next couple of weeks, these will begin to accumulate. So have a great Sunday. Again, observe your religious ceremonies as any way you see fit, and have a chocolate bunny on me. Bye now.